If you've ever swapped white rice for brown rice because you thought it was the healthier choice, you might want to take a deep breath and reconsider. A recently published study from Michigan State University has uncovered something troubling beneath the surface of this so-called health food. Brown rice, often marketed as the more wholesome, natural option, contains significantly higher levels of arsenic than white rice, particularly in the United States. And while that might sound like a dry statistic at first glance, it carries weighty consequences, especially for children, immigrants, and people living with food insecurity. This isn't a minor dietary footnote. It's a potential public health issue hiding in plain sight on dinner plates across the country. Let's be clear, arsenic is not just a benign element from the periodic table. It is a toxic substance. Chronic exposure, even at low levels, has been linked to a slew of serious health problems, from developmental effects in children to increased risks of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. And here's where things get really uncomfortable. Brown rice, long considered a staple in health-conscious kitchens, contains higher concentrations of inorganic arsenic, the more toxic form. In some cases, brown rice carries over 40% more inorganic arsenic than white rice. This is not a speculative concern or a theoretical risk. This is based on data collected from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's own dietary intake research. Why is this happening? It's rooted in how rice is grown. Unlike other grains, rice is cultivated in flooded fields, a practice that makes it uniquely efficient at absorbing arsenic from both water and soil. And while this affects all rice, brown rice is particularly vulnerable because its outer layers, which are retained during minimal processing, hold onto more arsenic than the polished grains of white rice. So while brown rice does offer more fiber, magnesium, and some essential nutrients, these health benefits come bundled with a hidden dose of toxic metal. The study further breaks down exposure by region and population, and the disparities are startling. Children under the age of 5 are particularly at risk. They consume more food per pound of body weight than adults, making their arsenic exposure proportionally higher, and their bodies less equipped to deal with it. Even more concerning, brown rice-based products like rice cereals, crackers, and milk substitutes are often used in foods specifically marketed to infants and toddlers. We are quite literally feeding poison to some of the most vulnerable members of society under the guise of healthy eating. The burden is not equally distributed either. Asian American communities, many of whom consume rice at significantly higher rates than the general U.S. population, are likely experiencing elevated exposure. So too are low-income families relying on bulk rice as a cheap, filling dietary staple. This is where the idea of food justice comes into play. People making the healthy choice with the information available to them may, in fact, be inadvertently choosing a more dangerous path, simply because no one has warned them. And the regulatory response? Still lagging. Although the FDA's Closer to Zero initiative has announced intentions to reduce arsenic in food, the actual enforcement mechanisms and limits for arsenic in rice products are still too weak, and in some cases, non-existent. Unlike water, which has well-established arsenic limits, food regulation remains murky and slow to adapt. This creates a disturbing reality where a glass of water with the same arsenic concentration as a bowl of rice would be considered dangerous by federal standards, yet the rice passes as safe. Let's not be lulled into complacency by the common rebuttal that these levels are only dangerous if you eat a lot of brown rice every day. What does a lot even mean for a toddler eating rice cereal twice a day? What does it mean for a family living in a food desert, relying on rice as a primary calorie source? These are not theoretical extremes. They're real, lived scenarios for many Americans. We need to rethink how we define healthy. The cultural halo that surrounds brown rice, bolstered by decades of wellness marketing and dietary advice, needs serious reevaluation. Just because something is less processed does not automatically make it safer or more beneficial. The conversation around nutrition has too often focused on macronutrients, calories, or fiber, while ignoring the equally critical topic of food safety. If the nutrients come with a side of arsenic, then we have to ask, is it really worth it? This research does not suggest everyone should immediately abandon brown rice, but it does call for a more informed, cautious approach to dietary choices. Washing rice thoroughly, cooking it with extra water and draining it like pasta, and varying your grains, adding quinoa, barley, or millet to your diet are practical ways to reduce risk. But these are band-aid solutions to a larger systemic issue: a lack of transparency, regulation, and public awareness when it comes to contaminants in our food. If we continue to accept brown rice as a health food without examining the full picture, we risk making the same mistake we made with other superfoods that later revealed darker consequences. It's time to move beyond the simplistic health narratives and ask harder questions about what's in our food and who pays the price when our assumptions turn out to be wrong.